accounts of the special education system, a study of ASD. What is ASD? ASD, or Autism Spectrum Disorder, according to the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association, is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by deficits in social communication and social interaction and the presence of restricted, repetitive behaviors. So why this topic? I'm going to college for early childhood and special education, so obviously education and learning is very important to me. My research is based off the foundational idea that all children deserve a well-rounded education, one that will give them the proper tools and skills to proceed in life. However, I know that some children aren't getting the opportunity to develop these skills. So that's how I got the idea of special education. My expert advisor, Amy Key, a school psychologist in both private and public schools, helped guide me in the direction I wanted to go. At first, I was thinking about evaluating the special education system as a whole, studying any child who is in the special education system, children with ADHD, Down syndrome, ADD, dyslexia, but I realized that was far too broad and unattainable, so I decided to narrow it down a little bit to ASD. After that initial revelation, I wanted to study ABA therapy, seeing that is a very controversial topic. However, with the lack of resources and time constraints, I had to look for a more obtainable choice. So that led me to my research question. What do mothers of children who have ASD, and these mothers also work in the school system, think about the special education system? Now, while trying to design my experiment, I studied a multitude of reports and research papers, but there are two that really shaped the direction in which I believe my research should go. This first source is what inspired me to look at interviewing family members whose siblings or children had ASD. This one was an interview-based research, and it interviewed adolescent siblings, so children ages 8 to 10, whose brothers had autism, and they asked questions on what they thought about their siblings. This research yielded the result that most of these siblings wanted what's best for their siblings' future. And although these adolescents were very young, they understood to some degree what their siblings must go through. This study also inspired me to focus on central themes. Now, the second source I used to figure out which direction my research would go in was talking about how ASD is connected with the healthcare system. This research interviewed parents, and the healthcare system is already so complex, but this research concluded that there is a negative gap between the healthcare system and children with ASD. So, what is the gap? In all this research, it talked about different systems, but it did not talk about the special education system, which is what I will be addressing today. So, for my method, I chose narrative research. And Janine Overcash, a professor of clinical nursing and the co-director of the Academy for Teaching, Innovation, Excellence, and Scholarship, states that narrative research is used to describe various ways that humans perform the telling of events. Narrative research really captures the details and stories, and that's what I wanted to capture with my research, which is why I chose this specific method. Because I not only wanted to hear these mothers' personal stories, but I wanted to see the emotions that generated from these stories. Now, in creating my experiment, the first thing I had to do was write the questions. Now, this part was more difficult than one might think. The goal of narrative research is to hear people's personal experiences and stories. So the questions had to be broad enough to allow people to take it their own direction with their stories, but specific enough to where my data was not all over the place, where I could find central themes in each person's story. And I will discuss the questions I wrote further when I talk about the results of the study. But the next part of my research was selecting the participants. In my original research, I had just planned on interviewing parents, fathers, mothers, but my first interviewee happened to be a mother of a child with ASD, and she also happened to work in the school system. And I thought, with working in the school system, that would give a very unique perspective. So I changed my criteria. My participants had to work in the school system as either staff, administration, or a teacher, and they had to be a mother of a child with ASD. So for my sample size, I had 3 participants, and one might ask, why the small sample size? The small sample size allowed me to account for all of the details in everyone's stories, without having to skip over anything because there were so many participants to go through. So after I'd gathered all 3 of my participants, I emailed them an informational sheet, which basically answered simple questions that they might have. What is AP capstone research? Why am I studying this? And then I emailed them 5 of the 6 questions, and then I emailed this consent form you see here. Now, before any of the interviews took place, I made sure each participant had read the consent form and signed the appropriate areas, because these are personal stories, and all identifying information will be left out. They will be known as Participant 1, Participant 2, and Participant 3. Now, next was conducting the research. Each participant got asked the same 6 questions. There's not much I have to say about conducting the research, because that all comes with the results. In order to effectively break down my results and fit in the time limit, I will be giving a synopsis of the research. So the first question I asked was, what have been some interactions with teachers and administration, good or bad, that have left a lasting impression on you? Participant 1 told me that when it came to one teacher, she was very appreciative of her efforts. Before she'd even had the child in class, she asked about what he liked, what his special interests are, and incorporated them in the lessons to keep him engaged. On the other hand, one of the child's other teachers refused to follow his IEP because she said, and I quote, "We do not do that here." Further research shows that if a special education teacher does not follow an IEP, it violates their contract, at least in the state of Texas. But the second question I asked was, when it comes to accommodations in the classroom, how well do you feel that your child's accommodations have been met? Participant 1 and 3 were very pleased with how their child's accommodations had been met. Participant 1 shared that there was a lot of visual support and one-on-one intervention, which she believed was very important to her child's development. And Participant 3 stated that the accommodations at her school were beyond what she could have asked for. There was technology, there was iPads, and a myriad of sensory items of all sorts that helped keep the students engaged. Question 3. Are there any areas in general that you feel the school can improve on, or any areas that you believe are already successful? Now, I'm choosing to focus on one participant's specific answer on this one, because I believe that it was very important. This participant has a child who has graduated high school, but is still in the school system. That's because her child is in a VTC, a Vocational Transition Center. This is for people after you graduate high school to the age of 22. They can stay in the school system and have more time in school. They learn job skills, life skills, how to cook, how to clean, how to do yard work. In fact, this participant said that her child has a job now, where it works at a grocery store making pizzas and salads, which she never thought was possible. But this vocational transition center allowed for her child to learn how to be independent. Question 4. How would you describe your child's experience at school? Are there any moments that stick out more than others? Classmate interactions or lasting memories? Now, participant 1 told me all about an emotional moment that happened this year with her child. He came home all smiling and happy because he received his first birthday party invitation. Participant 1 said that while he was younger, she did not know if he would be invited to birthday parties, because some parents believe that when their child is diagnosed with ASD, it is a death sentence, but in reality, it is not. Participant 3 also shared that her oldest child will stand at the entrance and walk his classmates to class. She explained that this is a big deal, because although her son is at the age of 10, he is still nonverbal, but he has still found a way to show his classmates that he truly cares about them. Question 5. Are there any prominent experiences that have come to mind that you have not previously mentioned? I've chose to focus on what participant 2 had to say on this question. Participant 2 noted that her child often got overwhelmed in settings like the cafeteria. But there was a classroom made for students who got overwhelmed, which provided a calming environment with calming music and white noise and a lot of sensory tools that helped them relax at any time during the day. Question 6. Now, this question was purposely left off the provided questions that I emailed the participants, because I wanted their initial reaction, the first thing they thought of. And although they had slightly different reasonings, when asked this question, all participants gave the same answer: everything. All participants shared that they would do whatever necessary for their child to get the education that they deserve. In fact, participant 3, who had a job in the school system, had to threaten to quit her job in the school in order to get her son the proper testing and evaluation to be put in the class where he could learn the best. However, there were some limitations to my research. Time constraints made it hard to get more interviewees because interviewing takes a lot of time, and to match it up with my schedule and the participant schedule is very difficult. There was also trouble with gathering participants in the first place. The first person I had contact who said she would be able to get me in contact with other people for my interviews, she ended up dropping communication halfway through my research. So luckily my expert advisor, Amy Key, was able to help me get some more participants. And there are some implications to my research. This shows that although there are pros and cons to the special education system, the cons are what we should be focusing on now because that is where we need change. It also shows an understanding of each child's needs and the fact that no child is alike, but schools should be able to accommodate every child's needs. So, what's next? The next step in research, or the next person who were to research this, might widen the pool of participants. Mothers, fathers, parents who don't work in the school system might have different and unique perspectives about it. It would be fascinating to see what the findings would be. So in conclusion, there are pros and cons having to do with the special education system. And now that they have been addressed, it is up to the next researcher with much more influence and reach than I to incite change. Thank you.
Thanks, Abigail. A few questions for you now.
Okay, first question. How did your review of the methods used by scholars in the field inform your selection of a research method that is aligned with your research question?
So when doing my initial research, I saw that a lot of studies having to do with ASD are interview-based, and that was something I was very interested in. In fact, with my initial research, I wanted to do an interview-based where it's almost like a pyramid design. So if you answered yes or no to this question, it would lead to different questions. But I realized that that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to capture the emotions and the details in my research. So that's why I chose to go with a narrative research.
Next question. What are the real world implications or consequences related to your findings?
My findings showed the harsh reality of what some children have to experience in the special education system. And they are children. They deserve a well-rounded education that will help them develop tools for not only in school, but after they graduate out of school. So the implications are that every child deserves an education, and that's what the school system needs to work on better.
And finally, what was the most important research skill that you developed as a result of the process, and how might you apply it in your future endeavors?
The most important skill I developed was definitely doing interviews. It was a little daunting to conduct an interview for the first time, but having this skill will help me communicate not in college, but in future jobs too. Thank you.